Hello, my friends. You know that at LifeSite News, we have been going through a debate over whether Pope Francis is indeed the Pope or not. There are many on either side of the question. As we know, Archbishop Vigano has just come out on the other side, and for that faced the charge of schism and an automatic excommunication, as they say. Also, there was Archbishop Jan Pawelenga, who was in Kazakhstan, now living in Poland, who says as well that Pope Francis is not the true Pope, as well as the U.S. Bishop René Gracida. There was a priest in Italy just a little while ago who also came out. What was stunning about his coming out is that he is a very prominent priest in Italy. So along the same lines, why is resigning from the ministerium, as you said, instead of the munus significant? Is using the incorrect terms or formulas in this resignation letter really enough to invalidate it?
Thank you for this question, because it is a frequent one and one that has generated a lot of confusion. There has been much debate concerning the terms munus and ministerium, and some canon lawyers argue that they are synonyms and that Benedict could use them regardless. This is not true, and there is substantial evidence to support this. Firstly, in the Code of Canon Law and the Apostolic Constitution Pastor Bonus, munus and ministerium are used differently. A canon law expert, Cardinal Peter Erdo, published a study in 1989 demonstrating that these terms cannot be used as synonyms when they have a technical meaning. The Code of Canon Law dedicates only one canon to the renunciation of the Pope, Canon 3322, which says, if it happens that the Roman Pontiff resigns his office, it is required for validity that the resignation is made freely and properly manifested, but not that it is accepted by anyone. The Latin expression used by the canon to refer to the action of the Pope is muneri suo renunciat, meaning renounce his office. It is perplexing why Pope Benedict, in performing such a significant act, did not use the technical term munus, specifically designed for this juridical act. Why choose a different word if he truly intended to renounce the papacy? I repeat, those are the only two lines of law that cover the case of a pope's renunciation. You asked me whether the use of incorrect terms or formulas can actually invalidate the act. The answer is yes. In law, precision is crucial, especially for juridical acts of such importance. Imprecise or ambiguous terms can compromise clarity and render the act invalid. In these cases, the person's intentions must be clear, and there can be no confusion about what is being renounced. Further fundamental evidence that the two terms are not interchangeable is found in the official translations of the Declaratio on the Vatican website. This is a very important piece of evidence. In languages such as English and Italian, munus and ministerium have been translated with the same term, making it impossible to understand the difference. However, the official German translation is particularly noteworthy. In German, the words Amst and Dienst, corresponding to munus and ministerium, are distinct and are not synonymous. In the German translations, these terms were swapped. This is a very serious fact, creating the impression that Benedict had renounced the munus. This exchange is an intentional manipulation, and one must ask, why do this if using the correct term were not important?
Wouldn't it have made more sense for Benedict to clamp down on the San Gallen Mafia, who you claim in your thesis that, and many speculate actually, were plotting to elect a liberal pope as his successor, rather than resign invalidly and drop hints, hoping that good cardinals would be able to decipher his secret codes?
Thank you for this question, because it touches one of the most important points of the matter. I understand that this is a complex issue and we cannot have certain evidence to support this theory, but there are many clues worth considering. I have addressed these topics in my test, also citing other authors who have discussed them before. Looking at all the available testimonies, one comes to understand that probably from the very beginning of his pontificate, and certainly more and more over the years, Benedict was put in a position where he could no longer exercise his authority. The Roman Curia was so infiltrated by the Gnostic faction and ecclesiastical Freemasonry that it stripped him of power. We must recall the media attacks and scandals that marked the last period of his pontificate. Certainly, Pope Benedict did not have a sufficient number of lies to launch a direct attack against the enemies. And I'm not only referring to the cardinals of the St. Gallen group, but also the entire Gnostic faction infiltrated in the church. Therefore, it is plausible that he chose another way to combat these forces. In my text, I put forward a hypothesis that it is the only one compatible with the facts and clues we have, and does not imply any morally grave act committed by Benedict. The only possibility is that he had moral certainty that the future conclave would be invalid, and he decided to act in such a way that would allow him to leave clues for the truth to emerge. Italian journalist Andrea Cionci has even suggested that Benedict was in danger of his life, presenting evidence that points to possible attempts on him. If Benedict had died, the conclave would have been called regularly, but the machinations of the St. Gallen group could have still rendered it invalid, as provided for by University Dominici Gregis. However, in that case, it would have been much more difficult, if not impossible, to prove the invalidity of the election. Even Cardinal Burke said in 2019, in an interview with Patrick Coffin, that certain secret agreement made before the conclave could have invalidated the election. I note that, according to my hypothesis, the 2013 conclave was invalid from the start because it was called while the Pope was still alive and not renounced to his munus. Cardinal Burke assumes the conclave was valid, but his words confirm that such plots could compromise the validity of the election.
How would you respond to prelates who criticize those who claim Francis is not the Pope, such as Bishop Athanasius Schneider, who has made strong statements like, and I quote, "Nobody has the power to judge Francis's status as Pope," end quote. And he says the faithful should respond to Francis's errors by resisting him, not speculating on his status as the Roman pontiff.
Thank you for this interesting question. I know Monsignor Schneider well. We have a long-standing friendship, and I appreciate him a lot. He has been a guest several times at the convent where I was prior about 15 years ago for celebrations and conferences. However, I do not agree with the position he has taken in this case. Monsignor Athanasius starts from the premise that Pope Francis is indeed the Pope, and his argument centers on the fact that a Pope cannot be judged, even if he makes grave errors. It is true that, as a rule, no one can judge the See of Peter. But here the issue is different. It is not about deposing a pope, because I argue that Francis is not the Pope. The Code of Canon Law does not address the possibility of a heretical pope, and canon law literature considers it only as a theoretical case. Monsignor Schneider justifies his position by trying to show that there have been heretical popes, but the few historical cases of heretical popes concern theories that were declared heretical only later, often on very complex theological issues. For example, consider Pope Honorius, the focal point of Monsignor Schneider's argument. Pope Honorius adhered to monothelism, a heresy concerning the divine will of Jesus. Today, we're not discussing new or subtle theological questions, such as monothelism. The situation we are experiencing is very different. Pope Francis, according to many, has taken positions that openly contradict the doctrine of the Church as defined by the Catechism and previous magisterium. This creates a problem. A pope cannot, by definition, contradict the doctrine he is called to uphold. The proximal rule of faith cannot contradict the remote rule of faith. Canon 752 of the Code of Canon Law states, although not an assent of faith, a religious submission of the intellect and will must be given to a doctrine which the Supreme Pontiff or the College of Bishops declare concerning faith or morals when they exercise the authentic magisterium, even if they do not intend to proclaim it by definite act. Therefore, The Christian faithful are to take care to avoid those things which do not agree with it. The faithful must give, and I quote, religious submission of the intellect and will, end of quote, to the authentic magisterium, even if it is not definitive. If Pope Francis is the Pope, then one must obey him. It is not permissible to say we oppose, will not implement Amoris Laetitia or Fiducia Supplicans, because if Pope Francis is the Pope, these are acts of the authentic magisterium. But this creates a contradiction. Obeying the Pope cannot mean going against one's own conscience and the doctrine. It is an unprecedented impasse. As I said in my homily, never give up on that lion, Francis' doctrinal errors are proof that he is not the Pope. Thus, it is not about deposing a heretical Pope, but about recognizing that Francis were never Pope. Therefore, the solution is not to seek compromises, but to open our eyes and work to demonstrate that Francis was never Pope. My position is that at the root of everything lies the deliberately invalid renunciation of Benedict. Unlike Professor Ed Mazza, who speaks of a substantial error concerning the concept of a dual papacy, I believe that Benedict acted deliberately, with a precise plan to save the Church. This interpretation is also shared by Italian journalist Andrea Cionci and Patrick Coffin.
If your thesis is correct, how can we now get to a true Pope? Will we ever have another Pope again? How do we do this?
Very important question. Hopefully this answer can enlighten many. The only solution is a canonical one. True cardinals appointed before 2013 must publicly state that Benedict was the last Pope, that he remained Pope until his death, because he never validly abdicated, and thus elect a new Pope. Only they, the cardinals, not those appointed by an anti-pope. Otherwise, another anti-pope would be elected. I do not agree at all with the actions of those who have separated from the Church, claiming that the Church is corrupt and must be refounded somewhere else. The Church is one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. The Church is not entirely and definitely corrupt, because this would be against Christ's promise, non prevalebunt. The Church is afflicted by a cancer, an extensive infiltration. The cancer must be removed. And those who can and must act according to canon law are the cardinals.
So finally, Father, why do you think your superiors acted so quickly to move towards your excommunication? The letter warning to you to recant your claim was sent just 4 days after your sermon.
The admonition actually was delivered me on October the 15th, so just 2 days after my sermon, not 4. I cannot say with certainty why they acted so quickly. To understand their true motivations, one would need to ask them. However, I observe that more voices are raising doubts about the validity of Pope Francis, and these can no longer be dismissed as fanciful theories or the product of unbalanced minds. Even on this platform, figures like Patrick Coffin and Professor Ed Mazza have recently taken a stand. It is possible that the Vatican is beginning to view this issue as a growing threat and wishes to use a firm hand to send a strong signal and discourage further criticism. But I repeat, this is just my hypothesis.
Well, Father, let me just say thank you to you for coming on the program, but more importantly, for your willingness, despite what could come to you, to profess the truth of your conscience, to speak for the faithful who are so confused in our day. And I would ask, Father, before we end off, if you could give us your blessing, please.
In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
Amen.
Gloria Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto, sicut erat in Dominus vobiscum,
Et cum spiritu tuo.
benedicat vos omnipotens Deus, Pater et Filius et Spiritus Sanctus.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Father, and God bless you.
Grazie, Padre Giorgio.
Grazie, anche a voi.
Thank you.